Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm so happy you're with us today. In the great world of afterlife adventurers, there are many people with various talents and skills who are interested in curious adventures, and they're often very interesting people all on their own. And I've long known about them and wanted to spend time visiting with them, but somehow our paths just never have crossed. And one of those adventurers is wonderfully our guest today. And as I've thought about how best to introduce him, I realized that at this point, we here on Seek Reality have been straying pretty far from our roots in the study of the afterlife. That's where we started. But we've been going all over the place lately. We've been venturing into related areas, like spirituality, which is not so far away, I suppose, but been going into spiritual growth, self-help, past life regression, all kinds of places. And here we are back today, right back where we started. And our guest today has such a wonderful name. I love his name. Our guest today is August Goforth. And don't you love that name? I've always understood him to be, I don't know why, a talented physical medium. And when I got in touch with him, he says, no, he's not really that. He didn't really want to tell me what he is. A, he's a personality in this field. And from the introduction to his recent book, which is called Ponderings from the Afterlife, I've got this. August is a spirit medium, licensed psychotherapist, and a direct descendant of the 19th century French author and spiritualist Victor Marie Hugo. So August is distinctively positioned to express works of spirit discernment into the physical. I love that sentence too. He has a unique eye for valuable historical material preserved for the ages this is something else wonderful I loved, by the publishing endeavors of his own small press, Tempestina Teapot Books. I love that. Such as the works of the early American mediums by the noted author N. Riley Haggerty. Now, we've had Riley Haggerty on, of course, on Seek Reality too. So it all sort of comes home, doesn't it, eventually? Oh, my dear August, welcome. I'm so happy to have you back with us finally. We had Riley back with us originally in 2016 when we were just a new kid on the block as a podcast. August, I'm glad to have you finally back again.
It's really good to be back. It's good to see you. How time is so weird, isn't it?
Time goes right past us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It hardly. It would be nice if it would pause for a moment and kind of let us take stock, but it doesn't do that, does it?
Right. And so I guess maybe to sort of add on or clarify that um I have physical mediumship tendencies. Which is different than someone saying I am a physical medium and they're developing for that and they're demonstrating and it's kind of a career in a way. Like, I don't want a career in any sort of way. And um, mediumship has been in my both sides of my family. Victor Hugo was a medium as well, and so this kind of um, almost nonchalant acceptance of it without really talking about it very much was just passed on down. Um, and so I've always had this connection in that way. So these physical mediumship tendencies, they're very. I've worked with a lot of physical mediums, people who have developed, and some very strange and wonderful, mysterious things happen. And it takes up a great deal of energy and time and devotion. And this is something that, as my tendencies were quite apparent since I was a child, and that caused all kinds of sort of issues with family and school, church, um, to try to sort of keep it undercover in sort of a way. Because what I discovered that people would either try to investigate in ways that weren't um, healthy in some way, or they wanted something from me or to use me in that way. And I'm very independent, and so I want to do things the way that I do. And so the key word would be mystery. I mentioned it before to you that this whole idea of mediumship, the afterlife, psychic things, it's all based on mystery. Um, and mystery is a story, and human beings, we love stories. That's what we do best. We love to tell stories and to hear stories and make them up and entertain each other. That and so this is one big story that we're involved in my life as well. So the physical mediumship tendencies that I originally had decided to develop, and during that time, my partner Tim, who is one of the co-authors of the original book, had transitioned from AIDS during the AIDS crisis, and that was a very intense time. And he, up to that point, my physical mediumship tendencies had kind of waxed and waned over the years, and there's all kinds of reasons for that, mixed up with human physical developmental stages and emotional stages and psychological stages and so forth. Puberty, all of that affects these kinds of gifts or abilities. And something about his transition and the horrible times that were going on there with people transitioning left and right week after week awakened something in me, and things got very intense. And Tim actually um, materialized physically into my presence, which hadn't happened since I was a child. And I had totally forgotten about that. As we get older, we forget about these things, but it kind of woke these things up. And it attracted um, a collective of what I call risen people. And that's just my word. Like we're always talking about, we call them the dead, the undead,
Right, right.
ghosts,
Prison is
and
better.
and there was this wonderful a poet from Scandinavia who was a mystic, and I forget her name, but we had corresponded briefly, and she had used the word risen in one of her poems, and I said, oh my gosh, that's exactly, it's risen. It's about vibration rising out of the body into other places.
So these were people then who had passed, but now they materialized in front of you. Were they solid?
Well, this was Tim. Only Tim materialized, and there's
Okay, him
and
materialized,
so
but he was
this
solid.
very very solid, right? Yeah. Um,
Wow.
uh, but it not long enough for us to touch or anything like that. But it was quite clear, and he was almost dressed like for a performance, and he was quite a ham and a wonderful sense of humor, and he was dressed um, in clothes that we would have worn when we were boys, like sort of old flannel shirts and jeans and
Wow.
um, things that just were meaningful to me and perhaps to no one else. But often the risen communicate to us if they can't speak to us directly in some kind of a way. They'll give us symbols of some sort. There's a lot of symbolism that go on. They have an emotional meaning for us, and nobody else would understand it, but the messages would be totally comprehensible to the person it's intended for. And so this idea of mystery is, I'm sure many mediums would know about this, is um, never ending, this mystery. Like you sort of start looking for answers about this or experiences. You want more experiences or more stories. The deeper in you go, the bigger it gets. There's more worlds
Wow.
within worlds,
Wow.
is a phrase that we use in these books. And all these worlds are interpenetrating, including the world where Tim is, or our loved ones are. It's all interpenetrating. They're not off somewhere else and easily accessible. And um, so I'm also a licensed psychotherapist. I have a private practice. I keep the two separate in that way for ethical and moral reasons. I wrote a whole paper about standards of care about that. Um, and the idea of these books, well, originally, so Tim's materialization caught the attention of people on the other side. People had transitioned, like, and there was a collective, like they had a collective of study in scientific ways. And so it was a collection of different scientists from different disciplines when they were on the earth, and artists, um, advocates of all kinds, educators of all kinds. And they were very interested in the fact that this happened. It seemed to be kind of a spontaneous event because of the bond that Tim and I had. Um, and so they approached him and asked him to approach me if I would be interested in being part of some of their experiments or explorations, because they were still interested in communication and contact and uplifting people and educating us about we won't be on this planet for all that long. And so, of course, the more we know about where we're going and what the culture and languages are, and
Right.
the more profound and beautiful our experience may be. So this is all about uplifting, and that's why the word "the risen" is something. And so it also raises the question: can we become risen, as it were, on the earth while we're still here? We don't have to wait to croak in order to, you know, wake up in a better place. We can wake up in a better place while we're here. So the books are. Um, Tim came to me. Tim was an author and an editor here in New York City, um, and um, and a very good writer as well. And so they just said the events just lined up so perfectly that they wanted to see if they could manifest a book through us. And they did. And that was the original book about the Risen Book on Grief and the Afterlife. And that book is a pretty serious book in that um, it's not beginner's book. It's not astral traveling 101 or mediumship for dummies. It's like it's meant for pretty advanced people in many ways, because it talks about physical mediumship, um, mental mediumship, contemplative mediumship. So it's a lot. It took about almost 9 years to write, a little bit at a time, as the information is coming through me. So like I'm not the expert on any of this. I still um, have some questions about some of the material that came through. And we mentioned earlier that it was kind of hard to find information about me at times. And so I have, but as you said, I know a lot of people, or a lot of people know me in many ways. So I guess I would say that I have a global but a quiet presence.
Yes, that's,
And
I think that sums it up well. Yes.
right, and I do know a lot of people back even before the internet, and when that was coming on and we were exploring it and spirit was exploring it and getting to know each other. And um, some people who went on to become quite famous in the eyes of the public, and others not so much. And so um, I just prefer to keep a quiet but global presence amongst all this, and not to. And spirit protects me. They know that I don't want to be famous or anything like that. I just want to be of service to people and to explore. That's my main thing, and yours too. It seems is that you like to explore things. This is all about exploration. It's pioneering in many ways. Like we're going into places we've never been before. Maybe other people have been before, and so we're kind of bringing back new information for people to ponder. And so at the end, there's several books, and there's one about the mediumship. And what I noticed as the book was unfolding over the years is that the risen authors or contributors were using grief as a common experience. They sort of wove grief through all of it, because a lot of this stuff, like you can sort of um, resonate with or not, but we can all resonate with grief. And I noticed that, and I said, yes, it's a common experience. None of you will escape it. And so I became very curious, and wanted to know, like, is there a purpose to grief, and why is it so god awful, and can't we avoid it, and it seems so meaningless, or is there meaning? And they said, oh yes, we're so glad you called that. Let's write a book about that. And so they did. And the next book is about it's called A Companion to Grief, which is not about trying to stop grief or cure it, but how to actually utilize the energy of grief in transformative ways, which very few people do. Our culture doesn't really teach us to do that, or at least mine hasn't. Um, and so after we transition, when we wake up over there, so to speak, then the transformation of that grief energy can happen there, but it can also happen here. and grief is meant to turn into joy, which sounds kind of strange to most people. Is that possible? But so this book talks about how to utilize grief in positive living ways that help you to rise and certain to make your life better. And it's called a companion, meaning it's not trying to fix your grief or cure it or explain it away, but just that I'm also a curious companion along the way. I'm exploring it as well too. And as I noted in the book, as it was being written, about halfway through, I had already experienced 8 people in my life who had passed away, like within a period of months. It was quite a bit. And then also one of my parents had stepped on the road towards their transition as well too. So it was all very meaningful to me then, and it still is now. At the end of each chapter in that book, the material is quite dense, is how people uh, say it. It's like they have to go over a sentence over and over and over again. And it's because there's depth to it. And it was orchestrated and constructed specifically by people in spirit, um, so that it would wake things up in the reader and it would elicit things. And then you would go back, you would have grown in some way and see it in yet another way. And there were certain key phrases throughout that were gathered and put at the end of each chapter to ponder. Like these are important. These may be strong, important, significant phrases for you. And so um, I like that so much, that whole idea of ponderings, because I would rather just sort of the simpler the better, rather than going through this dense material, as beautiful and powerful as it is. Um, so the next book extracted those ponderings. And so each chapter of this book called Ponderings from the Afterlife is taken from each chapter. And then there's a little essay written about from me about that, like what this means. And um, it's a wonderful book. The foreword is by Shannon Taggart, who you might know, who's a very, very good friend of mine and a well-known spirit photographer. We've traveled the world over the years and had all kinds of adventures and different kinds of seances, and her being given permission to use her technology, because technology often doesn't work in seances. They interfere with one another. So I just took a breath.
Well, one thing that people may be wondering about, because you seem to be expert on it, maybe you can explain it easily for them, and that's the differences among the different kinds of mediumship. People ask me to explain, and I sort of know the differences, but you could probably explain them better. Physical mediumship, mental mediumship, spiritual mediumship. There are they're more than differences. They're more than sort of just different ways to describe the same thing. They're actually different. Physical mediumship. How did you first know you were a physical medium when you were a child, for example? How did you first know that?
I didn't at all. I just assumed that everyone was experiencing what I was experiencing. Um,
Right. That's how children are. That's true.
yeah. And so, like, children's imaginary friends, they're not they're not imagining, they're having an experience. And just because you can't see or hear it doesn't mean they're not having an experience. And so when I would have what people might call an imaginary friend experience, my parents recognized it right away and just incorporated it into the culture of our family, and also started setting down some rules about it. Like, if we're going to go out to a restaurant, like when I was 4, they took me to a restaurant for the first time, and it was a bit of a disaster because I just assumed that the waitress knew that my imaginary friends were there. And I had expectations about, I didn't know that other people could see or hear them, and it was very frustrating to me.
So
I
you
thought
would
they
have
were messing with my mind.
2 or 3 people with you, other than the physical people who were in your
Oh yeah, often more. Um,
and more.
yeah, so
Were they adults or were they other children?
always adults.
Always adults.
Yeah, I think that's because I liked adults better than other children. I
Fascinating.
didn't like kids. They bored me for some reason. Um, I would play with other children and get bored very quickly because what they could do just like either repeated itself over and over again, or it just kind of ran out. And I had this mind where I wanted to, no, let's go in further, let's do more like this. And
Yeah.
but the adults were always willing to do that, but the children, their attention span, and they
Well,
have to
so
go
at
eat
what
something.
point did your parents say this is how you can tell the difference between the people who that others can see and the people that only you will be able to see? How did you learn the difference?
Not really, because they were having their own experiences as well, and so it was just an understanding. It was normal for my family. It was, and so we lived in a very uh, in the mountains in Appalachia, way up in these deep woods, and there might have been less than 1,000 people in the entire county. There was only one stoplight. I was
You had to
related to
populate
everybody.
it, therefore, with all these
Right.
extra.
And so, but because of the isolation, and we had, a large family, my father and mother had a lot of brothers and sisters, but we were all there. So it's like we were sort of this tribe, um, that other people in the county knew about us, but it was just incorporated as something natural. My grandfather was the town dowser, and that sounds kind of weird to people on the outside, but everyone there, if they bought some land, they would call my grandfather and kind of say, "Will you come douse the land to see if there's water on it so we can dig a well?" That's how they did it. And so there were other aunts and uncles and cousins who all had some sort of an ability that was just naturally accepted and incorporated into the culture there. So my parents, and this was before, so this was like back in the before the mid 50s. So there, not a lot of people had television. I can't remember, but so there wasn't a lot of information over television. There was no internet. Maybe a library if you could get to books. So dissemination of information, it was all experiential. It wasn't coming, you weren't looking it up and trying to figure it out. You were experiencing it directly. And of course, everyone had a life. We had to. People didn't have a lot of money, so everyone had gardens or they were hunting for food and things like that. So you were just involved in life, and you incorporated these so-called mediumship experiences as just an everyday part of it. My favorite story is that when I would go to my grandparents, the Hugos, who lived in a kind of a small hamlet down the road, for Thanksgiving or for large dinners, there was like this huge dining room table and a huge dining room, and then there were also extra chairs uh, pushed up against the wall in case someone came in and they said, pull up a chair and you can sit down that. So there was always extra chairs. But during these Thanksgiving dinners or these big family dinners, there were always people that came in and sat in those chairs, but never took off their coats and didn't sit at the table and just sat there and kind of watched us. Never spoke and would always like I was very small. I kind of remember being in, it must have been a high chair because it was sort of up looking at these people. And when I would look at them, because sort of there's so many people, I was fascinated. One of them would wink at me or smile, and it would make me laugh like crazy. And my father said, "Who are you? Why are you laughing? What's so silly?" Because my father had some resistance to it, so he didn't always see it. And people didn't. They just said, "Well, just leave him alone. He's just having a good time here at dinner." Like they didn't want to make a big thing about it, I think. Otherwise, it was a very well planned conspiracy. Sometimes it felt like a conspiracy as well too. And so there were all these shifts going on. And then when I had to go out and be amongst other children, like in my first day of kindergarten or going into the school, there were a lot of weird things that happened. And my parents, I suspect, my grandparents had a talk with the teachers because it was a Catholic school and the nuns were not from there. And so there were weird things that happened, and the principal understood everything, and the priest eventually understood everything. And so they stopped picking on me and didn't see me as a trouble, and they just sort of incorporated me into that way, and the other kids did as well.
That's fortunate because otherwise that would
I
have
was
been.
protected. That's the thing is I'm very protected by people in spirit. So
Oh, that's so funny. As you grew up, did you continue to see these people who were in spirit?
Less and less.
That's a
You
less.
know, I mean, as you get older, the world gets more complicated. Now everyone convinces you you have problems to solve, and you know, you have this career of school, and it's so structured, and people in spirit are not structured. And so there's, you know, just as the world got more
Yeah.
chaotic and weird and stuff, you kind of forget about those things, and then puberty sets in, and then you forget about everything, and um, it gets, you know, and it sort of, I want people to understand that, you know, we all have these mediumistic capabilities or tendencies, just as everyone has a certain predilection for drawing or music or something. There's different aspects, because the people in spirit, so to speak, are with us all the time, around us, aware of us all the time, and want
Was
nothing more than to
your
help us.
belief that all little children can see these people?
I suspect so. I mean, I haven't met all. I mean, I just it just seems that's the conclusion that I would draw. Uh, really, really little children, like before they're indoctrinated with anything, like they come with all this knowledge and wisdom automatically, which we systematically chip away at in order to make them fit, or we use a lot of fear in order to make them fit or make them solve problems. But pre-language, I think, before a child actually starts learning to speak to themselves in language, they're speaking in other languages. And
I did have one granddaughter that talked all the time about how her grandma was there, and could she
mm,
come with us when we went on, went for a drive and stuff. And we always said sure, and we had to make room for her in the car.
oh, I'm so glad you did.
Yeah, I we thought nothing of it. But
Yeah,
I had to explain to my son-in-law, who didn't believe for a minute that that was normal, um, because I thought it was. But yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and that particular grandmother certainly would have done that, with that particular granddaughter. She would have done that.
Right. And it seems like grandparents often are the easiest ones to have a contact or even relationship with for some reason. But
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
they love their grandchildren. Oh my goodness, yes. So yeah, I was not surprised that she did.
yeah, uh-huh.
But but um but I think, as you say, that both the talent for perceiving these people who are in spirit, who nevertheless come and visit, and the talent for perceiving that on the part of a child is probably very variable.
Hmm.
And the relationship.
Right. And sometimes it may, those spiritual senses that we call clairaudience or clairvoyance, and you know, kind of go latent, um, because
And
of the world and everything. And
yeah,
so, and often the only times that they're ever brought out of latency is through some sort of a shock, which is often grief. Grief is such a shock to people. And there have been a few studies done by people who worked in hospice for many years. Diane Archangel is one, Louis Legrand, people that I met and interacted with and were very helpful to me. That these studies looked at people who had lost a spouse through death or transition, we'll say, and had experiences exactly like I had with Tim, where they actually came into their bedroom and physically opened the door and came inside of the bed and talked to them, or appeared at the kitchen sink while they were washing dishes. There's something very normal and relaxed. Um, but two things, like it's so private and personal that they never shared it with anyone. And of course, there's the fear of
yeah,
stigma, you know, that they're going to lock you up if you say something, or that you're having dementia or something. So there's just this inherent wisdom that people have that this is very private and personal and intense. Um, the word I use is numinous, that is meant for you and you alone. And oftentimes the people who show up, you know, it's this. So there was there's some crazy statistic, like 80% of people who were interviewed reported that they had this experience, and often more than once. But this is all shared with the researchers as anonymity, you know, to protect themselves and things like that. I don't know if there's any more research like that that goes on, but it would be wonderful and
Yeah,
helpful if there
yeah,
was, you know.
I get only within the last 10 or say 12 years have I been getting those reports. I didn't get them before.
Mm,
I think
yeah.
that the veil definitely is thinning. You probably are getting reports like that too, that the veil is thinning. And it's easier and easier for people to be getting these visits than it was, say, 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
Well, oftentimes there's several things there I could say about that is, first of all, there is no veil. And it's not thinning. It's that people's awareness is expanding and growing.
Our minds then, maybe the
Right.
veil
Our
is our own
minds
mind.
are, as we become enlightened, literally with spiritual light, suddenly it's like now that we can see more, and those spiritual senses of spiritual seeing, now we can see more because we have more spiritual understanding, which is light, literal light
That's what it is.
in a way. And so it's it's sort of like the light is turning on in a dark room. It's not that because there's a veil in the room that's being removed. It's because now we're becoming more um, embedded or integrated with more of reality a little bit at a time. And this will go on forever because we're immortal beings. And so this is, so that's why I tell people just chill out and relax. Like, everything is always working out for us no matter what.
Do you
Uh,
think it's nothing happening? It's that we're more aware, and therefore it's more possible for us to
well,
be more
but
sensitive to it.
we're aware because of how the world is evolving and transforming, and a lot of drama, is happening, and change, very theatrical in a way. It's like watching this huge play, this huge Shakespeare play of complications. But as Shakespeare said, we're the actors on the stage and we're acting. And so
Yeah,
we don't know what Act Three is going to bring, but now it's happening. And as it was, oh, aha! So now that makes sense. What happened in Act One,
right.
and we have all these connections that we're making, and it's this connection. Um,
Yeah,
just the main thing that I want people always to remember and hold on to is take fear out of the equation. There's nothing to be afraid of. Fear,
of course.
right? You've probably heard like the acronym, like it's false evidence appearing real. Like it's not. There's no reason. You take fear out of the equation, suddenly things calm down. Maybe that's why
Right.
grandparents are so good. Why grandparents like show up so much because they're so good at calming children down. Right? They can just soothe us. They just know how to do that. The other thing too is that when a spouse who has transitioned shows up, they often will tell the person here, don't tell anybody. They say, just good advice, don't tell anybody, keep this between us. Like this is a bit of wisdom that they're imparting. So um, how long those relationships go, I don't know. You may know of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Um, so she's one of the people that I became friends with during all over these years, and we had very interesting way of meeting in relationship. And she had moved here to the United States, and we were corresponding then this through letters. This is before the internet or anything. And she had one of those experiences where one of her past patients who had transitioned had like come up the elevator and went into the office building and sat down at her desk.
Yes.
And she asked the person to, write, will you write something? And they did and everything. And then she walked them back to the elevator. And I can remember I told her, I said, you can tell anybody you want, like me, or people like me, but our colleagues, your psychiatric colleagues or our psychotherapeutic colleagues, uh, might not be so open in some kind of a way. So just proceed with care and caution.
Yes.
But she wrote a small book about it, and
Yes.
it didn't make waves. I think it made people uncomfortable in certain ways, or her colleagues uncomfortable. But it's quite brave of her.
Yeah, she was very adventurous, wasn't she? She
Yeah.
really opened her mind,
Mhm.
right, wide open suddenly for someone in her.
Right. And when you're open, suddenly things start showing up. And that's what
Yeah,
happened with me. Like when, it took me, I was very in shock. I sort of wandered around in shock for 2 or 3 days after Tim had manifested. It was just briefly, it was like a firecracker. It was so brilliant. It was just like less than 2 seconds, just in and out. Um, and until I finally shared it with I had to share it with someone. And that's important who you share this with. And this person was very open and intrigued. And because they already knew me, they knew that I was kind of weird. So they weren't surprised, but they didn't know how weird. But they said, okay. But the fact that they said it was okay, and how do you, they asked me like, well, how do you feel about it? This validation, that was the validation of my emotions. That sort of like was the hitting, that's sort of what hit the nail on the head and kind of pinned it to this
Yeah.
reality. And then I was in therapy at the time, and as all therapists should be, and I shared it with my therapist, who was very knew me very well and very open and fascinating. And so it was just opening, rather than shutting down with fear or worry or some kind of strange belief that it's the devil or something like that. And so it just
But
kept
that's so
leading.
foolish. People disrespect spirit so much when they say anything is of the devil or negative and so
I
bad.
know, but
That's oh
how do you think spirits respond to that? They just laugh. They
oh
just think it's
yes,
just
but
so
how
silly. Yeah.
horrible that people try to put in anybody's mind the idea anything is anything negative.
Right, yeah. And so like, even, like going to a Catholic school, very, very small, two grades in one room. Where I grew up, there were mostly one room schoolhouses. So I wasn't in one of those, but I was in a class of maybe 30 kids in two grades. And so we would have religious classes, and people say, well, didn't the nuns, they were kind of espousing all kinds of beliefs about death and the afterlife. I said, yeah, they were, because they believed it. Like they had a profound faith and belief in it. And there was a lot of, sort of weird, superstitious, dumb stuff mixed up with that. That maybe one of them had brought with him over from Ireland, where she came, or something, which was, but it, but it would, there was always, I sat at the back of the classroom because um, just how we were arranged, and I had a hearing problem and they didn't know it. And so there was always someone in spirit standing behind me, because the way the nuns dressed in those days, until the upheaval came in the 60s, it was hard for me to see their face and read their lips. I needed to do that. I had like this hearing impairment. And a person in spirit was standing behind me and would tell me what she said.
How beautiful that is.
But often the spirit would say, that's not right. What she just said, that's not right. And then I would say, sister, that's not right what you just said. And then it would start. And she said, well, who do you think you are? Where do you get your information, Mr. Goforth? And I said, well,
Oh,
from my friends. What friends? And then they were saying, don't talk about us right now. Like this is going to make it worse. And so it just got very weird. And then I would get sent to the
that's
principal's
funny.
office. I would get sent to the principal's office, who was this just wonderful, saintly, uh, suffering, bearing woman. And she would just sit at her desk and she'd look at me. She'd just have a seat there. We'll wait for a few minutes. She never scolded me, said anything. Apparently, my parents or my grandparents had to talk with her. And so she kind of understood this. Um, and then after like 5 minutes, she said, okay, you can go back now. And then I guess
How
the nun in the
sweet.
classroom thought that I was, reprimanded or something like that. But
Oh,
they left me alone. It was nice. Eventually, they moved me up to the front of the room when they discovered that I had this hearing issue, and so things got
yeah.
better from me. But
Oh,
that's this idea that things, I said before, it's like breadcrumbs, like the Hansel and Gretel story, like spirit and life sort of coaxes us forward. Most of us, we like a little breadcrumb at a time, and then you have this spiritual experience. Oh, I'd like more, and then you find the next one. And it's this
right.
mystery that never ends. And even when we get to the other side, so to speak, that mystery continues. It just gets more profound. And one of the most profound things that was shared with me through the writings of these books was that grief is a mystery. And it's not a mystery meant to be solved, because we're not meant to be here long enough to solve it. It's just something that is part of the process of becoming, uh, transformation, becoming a butterfly, becoming free. It's that's part. There's kind of a necessary suffering in a way. It's growing pains. The grief is part of our growing pains in some kind of a way like that. And so if you just try to take good care of yourself when you're in a grief experience, and take good care of the people around you who are having a grief experience, they're in shock, like it will be okay. And you'll continue having these experiences if you open up to them.
But as you say, when once you transition, suddenly you understand so much because you realize There was no need for the grief at all. Everybody is there, whole, healthy, young, beautiful, and
Right. What I've
joy of
heard is
reunion.
often the first response to people when they kind of wake up and they go through this process of illumination about realizing what's happened, and then they laugh. They just
Yeah,
laugh and laugh and
yes.
laugh. No, not everyone. You know, some people kind of end up over there um, not as enlightened as they could be. And
Oh, but the joy, the
one of Tim's
joy.
first jobs was to welcome these people. And he said, you know, more people are showing up here like they're so unaware, they're so underdeveloped spiritually, so to speak, that when they arrive here, they look like little dried up peach pits.
How could you not look around and say, "Oh my God, it was
Because people,
all it was all a little play," and
right, but
you're
because
afraid
people
of
have
it.
spent so much time investing all their energy into non-spiritual things, like they're not trying to evolve spiritually or grow spiritually or put things into context, like they're, you know, especially the internet and AI and all that. That's not real. There's nothing reality to that. You're investing all your energy into nothing, and so when you arrive there, you arrive with nothing. And you can see in many sacred texts, including the Bible, it says that you have to lay up your treasures in heaven, so to speak. You have to start
Yeah, well, yeah,
building
that's
this. So when you get there, it's like now you recognize, oh, this is Paris. Like you're studying Paris before you go there, or you know the language or something. And Tim says a lot of people get here, they're confused, they're out of it. He says they look like little dried up peach pits. Was his little joke. And he said, and we have to take them to healing centers and we sort of have to plant them and put sunlight and nourishing music on them to try to, you know, and educate them very, very slowly and so because they arrive so uneducated. And so mediumship is also about accessing information that is evidential and meaningful to us and helps us understand life a little bit more each time. And I always want to stress, and these books stress, that you don't have to become dependent upon some medium in order to get your answers. That if you, all the answers will come to you if you're open to it. Everyone has mediumship capabilities, so to speak. And I would love people to learn about that and to develop them for themselves. And it can bring a lot of very warm comfort to a person when you need it.
but it's I'm trying to develop some courses to help people to understand. You don't have to spend a lot of time on coming to understand the truth because the truth is so abundant here. I mean, there are things to be enjoyed here,
Oh yeah, yeah.
but you don't have to spend a lot of time at it, that there is so much truth available to us here now.
Well, you know how I mentioned before that there our loved ones, our wisdom loved ones, are not some off some in some faraway
Oh,
galaxy.
yeah, they're
It's
all around us.
interpenetrating, and so there's all these dimensions or worlds or whatever language you want to use interpenetrating, and you just have to tune into it. You have to find the right station, and mediumship is learning how to tune, and then suddenly you're hearing these stations and voices and emotional
Yeah,
stations you're tuning into, and emotions carry information. So your life here becomes expanded and enhanced, and there's more
yes,
nourishment in that kind of a way.
so much joy.
Mm.
And then you get there and you realize that that's what's real, and it's always been there, and it's always been real. And it's just, I mean, people
Mm.
say to me, "Why are you so happy all the time?" Oh my goodness, because I've tasted just enough to know what's coming. And I can live in it now just by thinking about it. And you're the same way, right? I mean, you know what's
Most of
coming.
the time. But the other thing too I notice is that the more sensitive you become, the more sensitive you become. So just as you're able to feel joy, you're able to feel sadness and grief much deeper. And so this book about grief recognizes it, says we have to actually go deeper into the grief, not forever, but just enough to go in to have these transformational emotions. The emotions are what transform us and grow us. That's why someone goes to therapy, is they want to start feeling their feelings and grow and learn from the feelings and how to feel how to have preferences. I would rather feel happy than sad all the time. But our sensitivity becomes, it can either become a tool that's useful, or a tool that's kind of prickly or sharp, or even a weapon in some kind of a way. And so now we become, the more you develop your mediumship or your abilities, the more responsible you have to become, and the more accountable you are for what goes on. And I see a lot of people developing or thinking they're developing mediumship these days, but not their responsibility, and they're not developing their accountability as well too. Um, Mediumship is a very, very private thing, and is never meant to be shared or promoted. And Tim used to make jokes about that, that they were protecting me in certain kinds of ways, because there were some mediums I knew that actually were given television shows. And Tim said, "See, like someone is going to try to capitalize on it. They're going to, they're going to have cereal for mediumship and sneakers for." He said they're, he was joking, but they're capitalizing it in some kind of a way, which brings it down into levels it's not meant to be. It doesn't work well, and people come away malnourished rather than nourished from these. So
That's
it's this idea of accountability and responsibility. Um, so there are rules, right? There has to be a structure. Human beings, we need structure of some kind. Anyone who has kids know their kids need structure. Teachers know that classrooms need, and scientists know the laboratories need structure. We need this kind of structure, and so mediums need structure as well too. And it seems like Riley Haggerty and I talked about this because he's such a well-known, well-versed historian about the different kinds of structures that were apparent in different eras here in the United States as we trace them through past mediumship. Hard to find. He's good at finding it. And so we still have some wonderful places like Arthur Findlay College over in England where you can go, and they will provide structure for you to use, how to approach things, beginning, middle, and end, just as you would anything like that. Lilydale is another place to go to learn and study. Chesterfield, there are places still where you can get this structure. Once you start structuring it, though, you've got to, once you have the wheel, you have to take control of the wheel.
Well, all I know is that when you know the truth, you live in joy. And living in joy is the greatest thrill there is. Knowing the truth changes everything. It said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free." And indeed it does.
Right. And then it raises the question, so what's the truth? And the truth is that you are free.
You are free, and you've been free
That's
all
the
along.
truth.
You didn't know
We're
it.
so free, it should just blow your socks off. I tell people, if you could actually realize just how free you are in your immortality, it should just blow your socks off. It's just
Yeah,
so,
it's joyous. It's
yeah,
joyous.
yeah.
Oh, my dear, we could talk all afternoon, but unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time.
Okay.
What do you want people, actually, that's a good thing to want people to know. But what do you want people to know from our time together?
I, I don't want people, like people already know. Maybe I want them to know that they already know.
Very well said.
And then people say, but I don't know. And so I said, but change that. Start change that. I want to know. I do know. And start finding things, validation. You're looking for validation. Okay, I know this. I know that. So it's this. So we move from hope, like I hope this will happen, and then it happens, and then it happens enough that we get a belief about it. So hope moves into a belief. And if the belief happens enough, then we develop a faith. Like, I know it will happen. But once you know it happens, you no longer need hope, and you no longer need your faith. You just know. I know that I know. I feel it here. It's my feelings tell me the truth. Even if 99 people around me are saying something different, but my feeling is saying this is what's true for me, then that's what I know. I know that I know that. I don't know if that made sense.
It does. Oh, thank you, my dear. We will be talking again. It'll be sooner than another 6 years,
Oh,
whatever it's been.
I would love that.
Consider yourself hugged.
Thank you.
And everyone, As you know, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Has this been fun? I'm very glad you could be with us today. Please never forget, you're a powerful eternal being. You never began, you never will end. And when you really get what that means, believe me, it changes everything, everything in your life for the better. Next week, we'll be talking with Karen Fullerton. She'll be with us for the second time, and Karen is a certified quantum energy teacher and thought leader around emotional freedom and well-being, and she primarily helps women. I don't know why, because I think what she does would help men as well. She helps them with emotional flourishing and what she calls spiral up. You'll see. Her website tells us that she's a popular speaker and she helps audience to just kind of get their groove back. Many people at midlife kind of sort of started out well, and then they kind of sort of got locked up, and she helps you get unlocked. I was skeptical about having her last time she was here, but she was just kind of a dynamo, and so I couldn't wait to have her back again. She loves to awaken people and just help them to discover their inner expert, she calls it, and to facilitate self-empowerment. We really enjoyed her when she was here last, so please be sure to join us next week. And this week, we've had August Goforth with us, and I think he's just very enjoyable. I usually I have a sheet before me, and I know a lot about people ahead of time. And all I really knew about August was the fact that he's kind of a legend in the field of afterlife research. And now I kind of no, we sort of remember why I invited him to come for the second time after 2016, the last time he was here, because I find him just fascinating, and I found him fascinating the first time he was here. So it won't be another almost 10 years before we have him back again. Um, he is someone who is a thinker, and he's someone who is a seeker, and I just find him to be very enjoyable to talk to, and I think you kind of found him to be very enjoyable to listen to. So we'll have him back again soon. And I'm going to do more reading of some of the things that he's written, because we learn a lot from the people who have gone ahead of us, and we learn a lot from the people who have been spending a lot of time with them. And August is someone, as you saw, he has on both sides of his family. He has people who have spent time listening to people who have gone ahead, and they're, people who are natural mediums, and they're the people we have to listen to more and more now, because there's a lot we need to learn so that we can help people who don't have that facility. And I'm excited to have him back and do some more talking with him, because that's really our true home. And there are the reason that Jesus came, frankly, to teach us is that he hated watching us turn on the wheel, as the Buddhists say over and over again, having lifetimes without really knowing where we were going. I'm trying to help people understand this can be your last. I don't care how many times you've been back, you can make this your last Earth lifetime. And that's what, frankly, August is trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do. And so let's all get together and try to make this everybody's last Earth lifetime. Let's depopulate the Earth for real this time. So we'll have him back again. We got to get serious about this, because we don't have to keep living lives and being confused and then having to go back again and try to learn it better. We don't. It's easy. All we have to do is learn to love perfectly. Of course, speaking about the afterlife, as you know, our great friend Craig Hogan is the president of Seek Reality Online, which is our one-stop resource for all things afterlife. Just go to seekreality.com and start to learn for yourself that your own reality really is eternal, like it or not. And I've had people say, I don't care. I don't want to, I don't, too bad. If you're alive now, you always, always will be alive, like it or not. So learn the ultimate truth from our dear friend Craig, who is your worldwide ultimate expert on all things afterlife, and you too can make this your last lifetime on Earth. You can go to the afterlife and live there eternally. And of course, teachingsbyjesus.com is your best resource for all the beautiful divine truths that are brought to us in perfect love by the greatest teacher of them all, Master Jesus. The Christianity we have not now, was never taught to us, sadly, by Jesus. It was taught to us by the Roman Emperor Constantine, and it's his Christianity, not Jesus's. As this Christianity dies, the Christianity that Jesus taught can finally be the one that we all practice. It was called the way, and it's the right way. So you can go to teachingsbyjesus.com and start to learn Jesus's Christianity anytime you want to. The website's not finished yet. It will be finished soon because Jesus has ideas that we cannot yet find someone who can execute his ideas. We're trying. Give us another year or two and it'll be finished. That website will be finished. We'll do our best. And as you know by now, my own nonfiction books are Liberating Jesus, My Thomas, The Fun of Dying, The Fun of Staying in Touch, The Fun of Growing Forever, The Fun of Living Together, and The Fun of Loving Jesus, Embracing the Christianity that Jesus taught. For young children, there's also The Fun of Meeting Jesus. And if you want to talk to me about any of my books or anything at all, you can always contact me through the green contact block on robertagrimes.com. Just make sure I have your right address, because if I don't have it, I'll write a nice email and it will bounce. That happens to me. Not quite a bit, but often enough that it's frustrating. So please just make sure I have your right address. And all of the more than 550 past episodes of Seek Reality are available wherever audio podcasts can be found. And there also, of course, are the new video episodes each week on Roku, Firestick, YouTube, and elsewhere. Meanwhile, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy. Please now go out and make the most of this coming week in our one reality, always knowing that you are a powerful, powerful eternal being, and in the whole universe, you, above all other people, you are the most eternally loved.